Hey friend, today I'm going to tell you about a strange thing I observed in a house I inherited from my husband's grandmother. The house is in a small town, one of those where almost everyone knows each other by name and the silence of the night seems louder than the noise of the day. When we received the news of the inheritance, nobody seemed surprised, except us. Grandma always said that place wasn't for visitors, much less for family. At first, I thought it was just the eccentricity of old people. We went there on a cloudy afternoon. The house was too pristine for someone who hadn't been seen in years. There was no accumulated dust, no smell of mold. On the contrary, the air was heavy, as if someone had just left the room. But what really caught my attention was the hallway. There was an old mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, right in the middle of the hallway. Every time I passed by it, I had the strange feeling that my reflection took a second longer to follow me, as if it were watching. On the first night, we slept in the back room. My husband fell asleep quickly. I didn't. Shortly after midnight, I heard footsteps coming from the hallway, slow, dragging footsteps going back and forth. I thought it was the wind until I realized the sound stopped right in front of the bedroom door. And then something I'll never forget happened. The doorknob turned. Not forcefully, not all at once. It turned slowly, as if whoever was on the other side knew exactly that I was awake. The doorknob turned to its limit and stopped. I held my breath. My whole body stiffened, as if any movement could betray that I was awake. I waited for the door to open. I waited for the creak. I waited for a voice. Nothing. After a few seconds, I heard the footsteps moving away down the hallway, just as slow and heavy. Only then could I breathe again. I looked to the side. My husband was fast asleep, his face too peaceful for someone who was in the same house as me. The next morning, I told him what had happened. He laughed, said I was impressed by the place, that old houses always make noise at night. I tried to agree, but something didn't add up. The doorknob in the bedroom didn't make that kind of sound. I spent the day exploring the house. That's when I found the door that didn't appear on the old floor plan that came with the inheritance documents. It was at the end of the hallway, behind the crooked mirror. I had never noticed it before, even though I had passed by it several times. The door was locked. I asked a neighbor about that room. He was silent for too long before answering. Then he only said that my husband's grandmother used to talk to herself in that part of the house, that nobody ever went in there, ever. On the second night, I decided not to sleep. I sat on the bed, light off, watching the door. The clock read 0047 when I heard the footsteps again. This time, they didn't come from the hallway. They came from inside the house. More precisely, from inside the bedroom. I felt the mattress sink slightly beside me, as if someone had just sat there beside me. The air grew cold, so cold that my teeth began to chatter. And then I heard a breath, very close to my ear. A breath that wasn't mine, nor my husband's. I remained motionless. I didn't have the courage to turn around or even close my eyes. The breathing continued there, steady, as if that thing was just listening to me. After a few seconds or minutes, I lost track. The weight beside me disappeared. The mattress slowly returned to its place, as if it had never been touched. The breathing ceased, and soon after, I heard the footsteps again, now moving away down the hallway. Only then did I wake my husband. He sat up in bed, confused, and turned on the light. The room was exactly as before. No sign that anyone had been there. No sign except for the hallway mirror, which now reflected the light from the room, even though it was out of angle. The next morning, I woke up with an intense headache. When I went to the bathroom, I noticed something that chilled me to the bone.
There were purple marks on my arm. They didn't look like scratches. They were like finger marks, too long for a normal human hand. I showed them to my husband. He became serious this time. She said that maybe I had bumped into some furniture during the night, dreaming, but I knew I hadn't. I started noticing small things throughout the day. Doors that I was sure I had closed would appear open. Objects would change places, and whenever I passed the hallway mirror, I had the distinct feeling that someone was behind me. In the afternoon, I decided to rummage through my grandmother's old belongings. At the back of a cupboard, I found a wooden box locked with a rusty padlock. Inside were old notebooks with yellowed pages and shaky handwriting. They all talked about the house. She wrote as if the place were a person. She said that the house chose who could stay, and that when it didn't like someone, it would start to show itself. On one of the last pages, there was a phrase underlined several times. When the footsteps begin, it's already too late to leave. That night, as I closed my notebook with trembling hands, I heard something different. It wasn't footsteps. It was someone calling my name, softly, dragging, coming from right behind the mirror. I stood still in front of the mirror, holding the notebook against my chest. The voice called my name again, a little louder this time, but still restrained, as if afraid to be heard by anyone but me. I looked at my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes sunken, but something was wrong. The hallway behind me seemed longer than it actually was. The walls stretched too far, and the back door, the one that didn't exist on the floor plan, appeared ajar in the mirror, although I was absolutely certain it was closed. I mustered my courage and turned around suddenly. The hallway was normal, the door closed, the mirror crooked as always. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother's grandmother. I never met her in life, but in the dream, I knew exactly who she was. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands resting on the wood, staring at me without blinking. She didn't seem threatening. She seemed tired. "You heard the footsteps," she said, without moving her mouth, "so now the house has seen you." I tried to ask what that meant, but I woke up before I could. When I woke up, it was still dark. The clock read 3:13. My husband wasn't in bed. I got up startled and heard the sound coming from the hallway. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was a continuous murmur, like a whispered conversation, impossible to understand. I followed the sound carefully. It was coming from the hidden door. The door was open. Inside wasn't a bedroom as I had imagined. It was a small space without windows, with walls scratched on the inside, covered in handwritten words. Some were so faded they were barely legible. Others were deep, marked as if they had been made with nails. They all said variations of the same thing. "Doesn't answer, doesn't look, won't let me in." In the center of the room, on his knees, was my husband. He spoke softly, repeating phrases I recognized from my grandmother's handwriting, as if he were reading something only he could see. When he turned his face to me, his eyes were glazed, and behind him, in the dark depths of the room, something moved, something that rose too slowly to be human.
My first impulse was to call him by name. The word died in my throat before it came out. There was something about the way he was kneeling, too calm, as if that place were familiar. "You shouldn't have come," he said, still without looking at me. The sentence was spoken in a low, almost affectionate tone. It wasn't fear, it was disapproval. I took a step back. The murmur ceased instantly, as if the house were listening to our conversation. "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask. He sighed, finally standing up. When he stood, I noticed dark marks on his hands, similar to those that had appeared on my arm. But on him, they seemed old, healed. "I tried to avoid it," he said. That's why I never wanted to come before. That's why I never spoke of her. He approached slowly, blocking the exit of the room. Behind him, the darkness seemed to breathe. The inheritance wasn't the house, it was you. My heart raced. I shook my head, denying it, but he smiled. A sad smile. Guilty. She needed someone new, someone who hadn't been seen around the house yet, someone who could stay. Grandma's words echoed in my mind. The house chooses who can stay. I tried to push him away, to get past him, but the hallway wasn't the same anymore. The walls seemed closer. The mirror, now behind me, reflected something I couldn't see directly. I grew up here, he said. I grew up hearing footsteps at night. I learned early on not to answer when called. I learned to look only at the reflection. That's how she taught me to survive. He touched my arm carefully. But the house always demands its due. The murmur returned, louder, overlapping voices. Some sounded like mine, others didn't. She was tired, he whispered. She needed to rest. She needed to move on. The mirror cracked with a dry snap. In the reflection, I saw the silhouette behind me lean, as if about to pierce the glass. I promised I wouldn't let her hurt you, he said, avoiding my gaze. Just change you enough. The house lights went out at the same time, and in the darkness, I felt something grasp my hand, not forcefully, like welcoming someone into the house. The hand was cold, not as cold as a dead body, cold as the house walls in winter. The fingers closed slowly around mine, as if testing if I was really there. My husband released my hand immediately. "Don't fight," he said, almost pleadingly. "If you fight, she'll squeeze." In the darkness, I felt something move around us. It wasn't a single body. It was as if the house itself was rearranging itself. The floor creaked, the walls cracked softly in a slow, patient sound. The light came back on suddenly. I was back in the hallway, alone with him. The hidden door had disappeared. In its place, only the smooth, intact wall, as if it had never existed. Where is she?" I asked, my voice faltering. He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "Everywhere," he replied. "She's always been there." That morning, he finally began to tell everything. He said that his grandmother never lived alone, that since childhood he had seen the house react to people. Some left too soon, others got sick, some stayed, not because they wanted to, but because the house learned their steps, their breathing, their voice. She taught me to be useful. Someone needs to prepare the next one. I understood then why the mirror was in the hallway. It wasn't decoration, it was a tool, a way to look without looking directly, a way to teach the house who you are, little by little. The following days were worse. I started forgetting simple things, where I had placed things, what time I had woken up. Sometimes memories would surface in my head that weren't mine. An older woman sitting at the table, trembling hands holding a cup, waiting for footsteps in the hallway. "That's normal," he would say. "She's getting used to you." At night, I no longer heard just footsteps. I heard routines, a chair being dragged, a door being locked, someone breathing behind the bedroom door, waiting. And the worst part? I knew exactly what was coming. I knew because my body would start moving before I decided. One early morning, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting it a little more to the left, the right way, the way she liked it. My husband watched from the doorway, silently. "Almost there," he said. "Almost there for what?" I asked, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. He didn't answer. She only glanced down the hallway, where the floor creaked softly, as if in approval. The house was learning from me, and I was beginning to understand why Grandma seemed so tired in my dream.
Last night, I woke to silence. Not the usual silence of the early morning, but an absolute heavy emptiness, as if even the house were holding its breath. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear creaks. I didn't hear my husband beside me. I got up, alone. The hallway was lit, although no lamps were on. The mirror was now perfectly aligned on the wall, not crooked. It had never been so straight. In the reflection, I saw my husband's grandmother behind me. She didn't seem like a spirit. She seemed whole, too young to be a memory, too old to be real. Her eyes held relief. "Thank you," she said, finally moving her lips. I felt a weight lift from my chest, not pain, tiredness leaving, a tiredness that wasn't mine. When I turned around, she was no longer there, but I understood. I went back to the bedroom. My husband was sitting on the bed with an open suitcase at his feet. He avoided looking at me. "You can go," I said, surprised by the firmness of my voice. He slowly raised his head, his eyes brimming with tears. "So, it's over?" I nodded. "For you, yes." He approached, hesitated as if he wanted to touch my face. He recoiled. For the first time, he seemed afraid of me. "Take good care of her," he whispered. I didn't answer. I heard the front door close minutes later. No creaking, no protest. The house accepted it. Now I write, sitting at the kitchen table, in the same place where my grandmother used to sit. I know exactly what time it is, even without looking at the clock. I know when someone passes on the sidewalk. I know when a door is left open for too long. I learned the footsteps. I learned the signs. Sometimes people appear saying that the house was left to me in inheritance. They ask if they can spend the night, if they are tired, if they need a place to stay. I smile. I say yes. The house still chooses, and I learned to listen.